For an increase, well, the name is quite self-explanatory. We are going to use an increase. You see, that's a noun form of the verb increase, right? You could also refer to it as a rise, or there was a growth in something, right? So these are the structures we use for increases. For decreases, what could you use? Once again, same color. We could use there was a fall, or there was a decline, or there was a drop in the number of something, right? So here we have the noun phrases. Or for fluctuation, you could say there was a fluctuation in the number of whatever. So a fluctuation. So far we have there was noun phrase. Let's do one example, huh? And you know what? I'm going to take, to make this even easier, I'm going to take these sentences that we wrote before, and I'm going to transform them one by one using the structure that we have here. Are you ready? Let's see. So we don't have the number of, right? So instead of starting with the subject, this time the subject comes after. So I'm going to delete this. Okay? Instead, I'm going to use there was. And you know what? To make this also color-coded, I'll follow the color yellow for the fixed parts. So watch. I'm going to say there are. Oh, I'm sorry, there was. Okay. So here it says dramatically went up. Okay. Now, check it out. I can take the same adverb that I had before and change it into an adjective. The original sentence was, the previous sentence was, the number of students dramatically went up. So here I'm going to say there was a dramatic. Now, went up. Remember, I could say increase, rise, growth. I'm going to say a dramatic rise. Okay, so far are you with me? Should be pretty easy. Then I have another part, which is part of the structure, which is in, and then I'm going to add my subject in the number of students. And then finally, I'm going to mention my adverb. And you know what? I can just pretty much copy and paste this here. Let's read the sentence. There was a dramatic rise in the number of students by 75% from January to March. You see, I'm following this same structure. Now, bear with me. I'm gonna basically rewrite all of these. Okay. The second sentence was the number of students decreased slowly from 5% to 80% between January and March. You know what? I'm feeling adventurous today, so I'm gonna create more variety. So what can I do? Well, I'll start with the adverb. I'll start with this adverb. My sentence will begin with between January and March. Now, very important tip here. Whenever you start with an adverb of time, like between January and March, you always need a comma. So there should be a comma after the initial adverb. Okay, so between January and March, what next? The fixed structure. There was. So I'm just going to copy that here. So from January to March, there was. Now, there was what? Decreased slowly has to change into a noun form. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say there was, whoops, the color should be purple. I'm changing it into a noun. So I'm going to say there was a slow decrease, or there was a slow decline. Remember, decline was also a verb that I could use. And then what do I need to say? I need to say in something. So here, I'm going to say there was a slow decline in, and then the subject will be repeated. And guess what? At the end, I'm going to add the adverb for quantity. So let's read the sentence. Let's see if this makes sense. between January and March, there was a slow decline in the number of students by 75%. Sounds good, right? Okay, let's do the next one. So decreased slowly, we've done this one. What about the one that focuses on fluctuation? I'm gonna make some more changes. So one more time. I'm gonna start with the yellow part. Fixed expression, there was. Okay, but then this one, it's describing a fluctuation. So what am I gonna say? I'm gonna say there was a fluctuation. There was a fluctuation, and then I have to say in something. So there was a fluctuation in what? The number of students. Okay? And then I'm going to mention from January to March, the time period as well. Here, this comes at the end. And voila. Now, one thing I've missed in my example is this, around 20%. Where does this go? So we could say there was a fluctuation around 20% in the number of students from January to March. You see, every single element in the original verb phrase structure made its way to this new structure that I have. And let's do this last one as well. So check it out. The number of students doubled from March to the end of April. So this time, once again, I'm going to start my sentence with an initial adverb. Okay? Just to demonstrate how these changes can be, and these variations can be applied to your response. So from March to the end of April, and then I'm going to say there was. Now, we had a proportional change last time, so we said it doubled, right? So here, instead of double, I could perhaps say something like a dramatic rise or a dramatic growth. Notice when I say a dramatic growth, it does not necessarily indicate that it was doubled, but when something doubles, it's considered a great increase, right? So it's doubled, essentially. So we could call it a dramatic growth because the structure that we have for noun phrases cannot be as easily used to describe proportional changes, such as doubling or half, reducing to a half or something along those lines. So we could say there was a dramatic growth, and then we're going to mention the subject, right? So in, and then you add the number of students to the end. And then if it doubled, then maybe you could add the amount in detail by saying from 20% to 40%, which is essentially a doubling, right? So for all of these sentences, which we previously wrote using the verb phrase structure, we have now produced an example using the noun phrase structure. So as you can see, very easy and accessible. Doesn't matter what your level of English is, as long as you are able to follow this pattern in writing and this grammatical structure, things are going to be really easy. Two things that I need to point out regarding the noun phrase structure. Number one, you cannot change the noun adjective format. What do I mean by this? So it's always a slow decline. It's not like the adverb where you can say slowly declined and declined slowly. Here you have slow decline. The adjective should always come before the noun. Another thing I want to point out is that sometimes, and this is something we're going to look at later when it comes to writing, actual writing, but sometimes you can replace the subject with a pronoun. And so, or you could maybe drop the subject altogether. I'll show you. Let's say we're connecting two sentences together. The first sentence is, there was a dramatic rise in the number of students by 75% from January to March. And then I want to say, following this, there was a dramatic growth in the number of students from 20% to 40%. How do I do this? So you could say it like this. You could say there was a dramatic rise in the number of students by 75% from January to March, followed by a fluctuation around 20%, or followed by a dramatic growth in the number of students from 20% to 40%. You see what I just did there? I used followed by, and then I added the noun phrase, and I didn't have to repeat the there was part. The same thing is also true for structures that are following the verb phrase construction. How is that done? I'll show you. So for example, you could say the number of students dramatically went up by 75% from January to March. And then in the next sentence, you say, next, it decreased slowly. So as you can see, instead of saying the number of students again and repeating myself, I very simply used the pronoun it to replace it. And so the sentences read better and there's less redundancy involved. Okay. What about adjectives? Is there any way that we can modify these nouns? So in the previous example, we had adverbs, right? So you could say it increased quickly, swiftly, suddenly, rapidly, or you could say it increased slowly, gradually, gently. What about if we're using a noun phrase? Is there any way to make a distinction between an increase that happens very slowly or very slightly versus an increase that happens very dramatically or very quickly? How can we make this distinction? And it's through the use of adjectives. So if it happens fast, then you could use something like quick, swift, sudden, and sharp. Let me show you how that would work. So remember in the examples we had, there was a dramatic rise. So you see, it's not just any kind of rise. In the previous example, we had dramatically in the verb construction. And so here we have dramatic, right? So as you can see, it's the adjective that is accompanying the noun, describing how this change took place. So as you can see, we could use dramatic, significant, and considerable. What about the opposite? What if the increase or the decrease that I'm describing using this noun phrase structure happened to a very small degree or happened very slowly? Well, if it's the speed you're talking about and it's slow, well, you could use slow, gradual, and then also gentle. There was a gentle rise, right? So these are some adjectives you could use. And then if it increases or decreases, not slowly, but to a very small amount or to a very small extent, then you could use slight or minimal. So what do I mean? I could say a quick increase. I could say a dramatic increase. I could refer to a swift fall, or I could refer to a significant drop. So you see, you mix and match and you create different noun phrase combinations. Same thing can be said for this column here. You could talk about a slow growth, or perhaps a slight rise. You could talk about perhaps a gradual decline or a minimal drop, right? So mix and match to create different structures and to create variety in your writing. But I'm still going to highlight all of this in the same color because this is still part of the noun phrase construction that we are forming. If you enjoyed this video, please do me a favor, like, subscribe, and share this link with other people who may find this content useful. As always, Thank you all for watching, and I'll catch you all in the next one.